And welcome, boys and girls, to the relaunch of Loosely Scripted. Took the month of May off, and we've returned here in June with a fury. For the very first episode here in June, we are bringing in a good friend and fellow commentator who's been a voice for Counter-Strike since the very early days, an OG of esports, Mr. Vansilli. Alex Nguyen, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. You know, this is actually the first time that I was able to do a podcast, just talking to myself in all the amount of years that I've been in the scene of casting. So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm getting the jitters. I got the butterflies, and excited to have this conversation today with you.
Now, speaking of your career, what was the first time, looking back, like if you had to pick a date or a year, what would it have been the first time you casted Counter-Strike?
Oh, that's an easy one. That was CPL Dallas 2003. It was Counter-Strike 1.6 in that month, and it was Team 3D versus 4 Kings on DE CPL Mill. So first time that I've actually seen that map, and probably the second time that I've ever casted CS, and that turned out to be on ABC World News, and then it was actually quite hype. You could find it on YouTube somewhere, I think.
Yeah, it'll be an old 4.3 YouTube video that was backed up, likely from Gotfrag or something like that, one of the early sources of esports information. How about if you were to pick a non-Counter-Strike? Like if you went back even earlier, what was the first time you ever casted a competitive game? Because back then there wasn't esports; it was just competitive gaming.
Right. That's right. It was called competitive gaming before. I think the whole term of esports, by the way, I'm going to diverge a lot in our conversation, but
that's fine.
I think it came out once Justin TV/Twitch really came about to me, that esports finally got like the seal on paper that it was defined as that. But the first time that I've probably ever casted a match outside of Counter-Strike, outside of esports, or what used to be competitive gaming, was definitely Urban Terror, which is a Quake 3 mod, and that was back in 2002, so just a year before I did my first live event.
Urban Terror. I don't actually think I've heard of Urban Terror before. That's how old that is. I remember the early days of like the old modding community. Like most people probably know this about Counter-Strike being a custom mod.
That's
but
right.
some people don't understand, like, Counter-Strike was not made by, not Valve back then. It would have been Sierra Games. So Counter-Strike was not made by them. It was made by a third-party developer, and then it was basically bought by... I don't think Sierra Games... Maybe they bought it, because it would have been pre-Valve.
Yeah. I do remember a Sierra box, actually, with the Counter-Strike face
that would have been the earliest version of Counter-Strike you could purchase on disc. Would have been, and that would have come from Sierra Games.
Sierra had some good games, man, by the way.
Yeah.
King's Quest and all that stuff. I was a huge King's Quest fan.
So I was talking about this the other day, and I was like going back into my memory because DDK had posted something out on Twitter and said, like, I'm looking for suggestions for point-and-click adventure games. And I'm like, oh my God. That is like, I grew up on point-and-click adventure games, like the old LucasArts games, like Indiana Jones, King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest, Day of the Tentacle. Like, all of these games are so good, and I remember spending hours trying to play through them. It's nice to have someone who's as old as me to talk about it.
Dude, honestly, like, it brought back memories as well, because I actually responded to DDK on that thread, and just like you, Buck, I talked about the top 3. I couldn't really put a number 1, but definitely like the whole Monkey Island series was my number 1.
Those are so good.
Yeah, then Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis was my second one, and then my third one was a tie pretty much between like the Dig, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, Day of the Tentacle, or Sam & Max Hit the Road. So
I love the Sam & Max franchise as well. They're all so good. Like, I remember typing them out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot about these games. In fact, right after I typed that tweet, I went onto the Steam store and bought a bundle that includes Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, because I know I have it on.
I did the same thing. I installed it. I'm like, you know what? I might start streaming. Well, I started streaming recently again, but I'm gonna probably do some like variety games where I'm probably gonna do like some point and click games, because I hopped on Launders' stream maybe about 2-3 months ago, and it was playing one that came out in 2017 called Thimbleweed Park.
Yeah, that's a good game.
Yeah, that's it. And he couldn't beat it. So I was solving the puzzles in the chat with him. I was like, yo, Vance, you just want to play? I just want to watch. So then I just started hopping on his stream and then beat the game for him. And I was like, you know what? This brought back the days. And even before that, even before point and click games were point and click, when it was actually just like type out open space door, and then you would
like
walk to a place, right? Like the Hugos. I don't know if you ever played Hugos or Maniac Mansion. I think Maniac Mansion.
I've played Maniac Mansion, which was technically graphical, but not really.
That's right.
I think they were called Scums, right? Was it Scums?
Exactly. Exactly. Scums. Yeah. So those were the days for sure. But yeah, to get back onto it, I think Quake 3 Urban Terror was the first one that I did. So Quake 3 came out in ~99. I played Quake 2 before that. So then Quake 3, I started playing a lot of Rocket Arena 3. Which is how I met Damage from SMF and all those guys back in the days from like Call of Duty 1. But after that, I discovered Urban Terror, which was a simple transition for me from that to Counter-Strike, because it was the same type of game style. I was playing a lot of Team Survivor, which was basically eliminate the other team and then you win. But they also came out with Bomb Defuse as well. But the mechanics had a lot of you had a stamina bar, but you could also basically bunny hop and slide. So you had it was a very fast-paced action tactical shooter that really didn't make it that much realistic, but at least the guns and stuff of that were. And that's how I got my feel into competitive gaming, like the real competitive gaming, because, of course, in Quake 2, I played a lot of Capture the Flag. But then when I played Quake 3 Urban Terror, then I listened to Warwich from TSN, Team Sportscast Network, broadcast an OGL Battle of the Beachhead. It was Abuse versus Doctors, I think. And then I was like, holy crap, man, this is awesome. And we were listening to basically AM radio. And I was like, wow, I want to try this out and start casting Urban Terror and do that for the community.
That's the crazy thing. Like when you look at the connection between current gaming trends, like esports stuff, and commentating, it's not like the same that is in sports. Like I could probably watch a football game and not really have like a play-by-play in color, because to me, it like that. Yes, it does add an element, and it would feel almost like naked without it. It would feel bizarre, like unnatural. But the tie between esports and live commentary is greater because originally that's all we had. And I guess the same could be said for sports as well if you go back far enough, whereas the modern era of sports, most people don't remember the era prior to television or televised broadcasts of live sports. So, I mean, we're not going back that far.
No.
15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, before games were ever even recorded. Sometimes it was just like the radio broadcast, and it would be put out like oh my gosh, what was the old Winamp thing? What was the old Winamp thing though? It was Shoutcast, wasn't it?
Shoutcast, exactly. Yeah.
Hence
really
where the term comes from. Yeah.
Yep.
So shoutcasting was the original terminology. Like even when I came into the industry in 2014, we were still called shoutcasters back then.
Yep.
That was 6 years ago. It's obviously changed now. It's become commentator or caster. Most people prefer the terminology commentator because commentator is maybe more in line with what's used in traditional media.
Yeah.
Whereas caster, in fact, this is a great story. When I first got my start in esports, I set up my email. I had my Twitter account. Everything was like working out. I was getting like small gigs here and there. I got approached in an email, and I was like, oh, it was like looking for casters. I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And then the email was like, I need one 3.5 inches with a 4-inch plate. I need one 5 inches with rubber wheels. And I was like, wait, what? They were looking for the wheels literal caster wheels. And like, I wish I saved the email. I bet if I dug deep enough into my inbox, I would find that email and I'd crack up laughing. But that was like I remember it was the first time I really got approached through email, and I got all excited and got disappointed.
I think for me, it could be an unpopular opinion, but I really do enjoy the term shoutcast.
Because do I.
It was basically unique to our scene, right? Unique to our broadcast, unique to how everything started when you started broadcasting these matches. And because it was from, like you said, the Winamp shoutcast, it was also because we literally shouted in a microphone to hype up a play. Because if you were not a person that played Tribes 1 back then when they first started as a Tribe Shoutcast network, or you didn't play Return to Castle Wolfenstein, right? It was the best. The skiing on the mountains and everything too was dope. But if you're unfamiliar with the game, your role as a shoutcaster was not necessarily only calling the action, but you had to be very detailed in your broadcast so that people could kind of like paint the picture in their head. Because if, for example, you're listening to AM radio and you're listening to a hockey game, you kind of could picture it. You're going to see the hash mark, the blue line, and then if you have any type of if you're familiar a bit with how the ice looks, then you kind of picture where the action happens, right? So if you're not that familiar with Tribes, or you're not that familiar with any other games, you really had to paint the picture as a shoutcaster for somebody who's unaware of the game to really imagine what it could look like, and maybe entice them to even get into the game, get into the community, and follow along right after. So it was really fun that back then to kind of do that and really hype up plays, because you really want to be a good the person that brings the action into color. Exactly, literally that.
Yeah, I mean the way to look at it is like this. Like you're saying, if you're listening to sports, you understand that every hockey rink is the same size. So when they say the blue line, they don't have to talk about which blue line. They don't have to tell you most of that stuff, because you understand what the rink looks like and you have a rough understanding. Every hockey rink's the same. Every football field's the same, with some exception. Baseball fields are pretty much the same. Obviously, it's still a diamond. The infield is still the same shape. It's dirt and grass. You know that. It's the outfield that obviously changes, which to me still kind of blows my mind that the walls are different. Yeah. Like I still to this day don't quite get that. It's the only sport that I can think of that has that kind of layout. Maybe cricket's like that, but I don't know anything about cricket, so I wouldn't really understand. But But when you look at like maps in Counter-Strike, for instance, if you were to start doing a cast, there are sometimes overlapping terminologies. So you can't just say one word to describe where someone is. You have to very much get into the detail. And that's what we do now. Like a commentator is basically dictating the action. And even in the early days of competitive CSGO, I remember there was someone who ran something called CSGO Radio. I don't know if you ever saw this. It popped up on Reddit probably about 2014, before things had really started getting out of control and salaries were through the roof and events were in arenas. And the idea was like a lot of the people back then didn't necessarily have like super great internet to consume 1080p video. And they
Yep.
also didn't necessarily have great mobile data. Because the one thing we have to remember is just because Europe and the United States has great telecommunications and infrastructure for networking doesn't mean everywhere else does.
Yeah.
So this guy basically set it up so that he would digest all of the streams of online competitive like CS and would then just turn them back out as a radio broadcast. So you could just
Wow.
jump in. It was really cool. It didn't
Well,
survive, obviously, because
yeah.
everyone's now on the video kick. Even as I say that, we're recording this with video, even though it's a podcast. But that's just like the way things used to be. It used to just be audio, and that was all we could get. So I guess I gotta tip my hat to you for doing that in the early days, and also paving the way for some of us who came later on. Is it weird now to think of yourself with like any kind of status in the community? Because you took a long break from casting. Do you come back and feel like I'm still like this OG who's been around, or you feel like you're the new guy again?
You know what? To be honest with you, I've always felt like I was the new guy no matter what, because I always felt like I always had something to prove. And at the same time, there's always room for improvement. So I could never be at a top echelon or something like that. Definitely have pride in terms of like, hey, I was one of the first casters doing um, competitive gaming for radio, and then one of the first casters to do video when we were like the first ones with TSN. Even Radio ITG started doing some radio where it was very expensive. But in terms of like proving myself to a community, I've never considered myself or never wanted to have that ego to say like, look at me or base your example off me, because I'm here to entertain my fans or the fan of the game, right? If you don't like me, you like the game. And if you like the game, there's a certain standard that you hold the game to, and that you want that to be broadcasted at that level. And I always aspire to reach that level. So when I was, I don't know, I don't necessarily call it my peak or whatnot, but when I was starting to do more events and stuff like that too, and doing multiple games as well, I started to fall off a bit, in a sense that I was never on top of my game in terms of knowing what's going on in the scene anymore, or how plays should be done and stuff like that too. So there's always such a learning curve, because what's good about CS, for example, is that the learning curve continues on. The meta continues to evolve with the changes and the patches, the way that the game is played. Even though it seems very linear, it's just there's so many new ways of playing a game. So now that I make a comeback after, let's say, a break of, well, let's say I left in like 2011, 2000, no, actually, ESEA 15, 16 were probably my last events, and then a bit of CEVO Online and MLG Columbus. So MLG Columbus 2016 was that minor, right? So that was probably my last big event for CSGO. Then I did a couple of side things online here and there, but never really focused back on it full time until maybe, let's say, last month or two. So now that I come back into the scene, it's not like, hey, I'm an OG guy. I've casted Counter-Strike since 2003. I deserve this, right? I don't deserve anything. I feel like I should work my way the same way as everybody else, in terms of an aspiring caster and stuff like that too. And I would never want to use my network to actually take an upper hand versus an aspiring caster that is probably a lot better than me today, right? So I really want to prove my worth, and to have the people who love the game love the way that I cast it, so that I could grow organically with the community.
The
And
crazy
that's how I
thing,
see it.
I was approached about that MLG Columbus minor.
Yeah.
I turned it down.
Why?
I was already committed to do another event, and I just, like, as much as I wanted to do it, I really wanted to do it, I just couldn't.
Yeah. Dude, it was what? Richard Lewis, Sir Scoots, myself, Moses, Garrett, I think, was there.
Yeah. Wasn't Mega
Yeah,
Man
and
there as well? No, it
Mega
was
Man was there as
Sprawl.
well. No, yeah.
Sprawl, Vancouver caster.
Yeah, I don't remember Sprawl. I don't think Mega Man was there. I was with Mega Man doing ESEA LAN, if I'm not mistaken, right?
But I know.
No, it was MLG. It was
Yeah.
MLG minor with
Yeah.
Mega Man. Yeah, so because I was rooming with
And
them.
GB James too. Didn't GB James get on that broadcast? There was
I
an
think GB
interesting
James was there, too.
collection of people that worked on that broadcast.
That's right.
Because
I wonder why.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there was like another event
There had
going
to
on
be
the
other
same
events
weekend.
happening, yeah.
So I think there was a
Yeah.
conflict, because that was right
Yeah.
in the era where that started to become a problem. Like
That's
if you
right.
go back to 2016, like LAN overlap wasn't really a thing, and then you had more forces coming in. And this is not a knock against anyone; it's just the reality of the situation. You
Still is today.
had ESL and you pretty much had MLG, and then you had Star Ladder, and then Face It was starting to come through with the stuff that they were doing, and then you had all these third-party event activators. You had DreamHack, so it all of a sudden started to get a little crowded. There was a lot of these events, and then I remember in 2016 looking at 2017's calendar, I'm like, oh my god, because back then I used to have access to the event coordinator's calendar. I haven't seen that now in way too long, and to be honest, I don't know if I want to, because I might get sick just seeing.
It's busy. Busy.
The thing is too, like you remember in the early days, events were 3 days. You know, there was no Swiss group stage, there was no craziness. Everything was pretty much like what DreamHack Open does: GSL group stages, into bracket play, single elimination. Now it's like Swiss stage groups take like a week.
Yeah, and even that is not too bad, because even if it took a week, your casting day or your playing day is probably still like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
If there's no overtime and stuff like that too. But when you look back at 2003 to 2005, when we're still like having an organic growth of LAN games, and it was like open tournament, come in, sign up, and play. You would go to a CPL and have 128 teams play in a double elimination bracket, first to 13. By the way, I don't know if you guys watched the Counter-Strike event that was last weekend for charity, and it was like the first to 13. Well, it was that style back then too, but we were casting one game and then hopping into the next one and then hopping into the next one. But then the CPL was also only a 3-day event, so you were starting your day like at 8 a.m. and you would get out of that venue by like 10 p.m. So you would have 12 to 14 hours of casting. And even if you're not casting, you're still holding on the sidelines, because first off, let's say, for example, at TSN, you had like, I don't know, 12 people as a staff going in, all voluntary work moving in, because we all had a passion for the game and a passion for casting. So then you don't want to miss out onto the next one. You want to hop on to the next. Or if you're not casting, you're waiting on the side being like, put me in, coach, put me in, coach. And then you're just giving your best, and it's super long days.
That's the funny thing now, is it's changed a little bit, and I think part of it is because we've gotten a little bit spoiled. Speaking of just talent, in that we still love what we do. This is not to say that we don't like what we do, but when we go to an event and games go long, there's almost like a
like, oh my god, man!
Like,
what is this?
This is a great game, but I just wanted to.
It's it's like their fifth overtime. I remember actually it was like a clip. It was like a classic game that came. It was also a MLG Columbus, if I'm not mistaken, but it was like a DDK and a James Bardolph broadcast that went to like quintuple overtime, and you saw that they were like gassed out by the end.
Yeah.
But back then you were like, and I'm not knocking them off, but like back then you're like, holy crap, this is like the fifth overtime. Bring that hype. But then at the same thing though, the difference is when they casted it, I think it was still group play, so there wasn't a crowd yet, which means that you can't really feed off
you need that
the action of the crowd to keep going. That you can't feed off that energy. Exactly.
Yeah.
For CPL, even though like you had a huge crowd watching the two 42-inch screens by your casting booth, it was maximum like 50-60 people, but 50-60 people back then was like a lot of people, and you fed off that hype, and you just kept going and going if it had to go to like a triple overtime, such as the 3D Team 3D and Team SK matchup that I broadcasted with Midway and Human for that one.
That was the fun thing for me, is when I started working up more and more in the space, and eventually got hired by ESEA to do full-time work. Even early on, I was just doing broadcast work. But I remember one of the first gigs I ever did for ESEA and ESL was like an event in PAX. It was a small activation at ESL's booth, where we were going to have pro players go into the audience, select a fan, and bring them on stage, and the winners got like a RAM kit from Crucial, which, by the way, is still in my computer to this day. They gave me one of the extras. Well, the deals that they were supposed to have fell through. It was supposed to be Fallen and Coldzera, I think, or Fallen and Fur, which would have been great, but then it all fell through. So they ended up working with more influencer level people, which ended up being Sapphire and Lex. It was a lot of fun. Blue and I casted it. It was right after I got back from Poland, and we went to this event in Seattle. It's the only time I've ever even been to a PAX event, which, by the way, is also overwhelming.
I still haven't been to one.
Yeah, it's a little bit wild.
Nice.
But I remember we're waiting in the lobby. We're all grouping up. We meet up with the product manager from ESL there, who's going to escort us over to the venue. And Sapphire's like, we're just waiting on Kyle. And I'm like, okay. And I look over, I'm like, who's Kyle? And she goes,
K-Sharp?
K-Sharp.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I'm like trying not to fanboy, but I remember watching K-Sharp videos, like a lot
Definitely.
of them. And then I ended
Mhm.
up working with K-Sharp for years.
Yeah, yeah.
And like we joke and call his drink the K-Sharp, and we hang out with we would hang out at all the events and go get dinner, and like we were all friends with each other. But it's just like at first it was such a like hard time to not fanboy, because here I am as this like young caster who's a young, quote unquote young as in experience, not young as in
Yeah,
age.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was old.
definitely.
But I'm like sitting there down there thinking that, and then fast forward a year or two, and I'm working full time for them, and I start getting pulled into like some of the more business side meetings and product,
Mhm.
and I'm sitting with Trevor, and it didn't even click at first that
That it
that
was
was
midway?
midway. Like it didn't even I didn't even connect the dots until eventually he said something about broadcast. He's like, I know in my day it was a little bit different, and I'm like, oh yeah, you must get. Oh wait a minute, and like all of a sudden like all the wires like
Mr.
cross.
Schmidt.
Yeah, I'm like, this is so cool. So it was neat.
Yeah.
Like I've gotten an opportunity to work with some of like, I guess you could say, the esports founding fathers.
Yeah.
Like I've had conversations with people who are around in the early days, like Craig Levine and oh my gosh, I'm blanking up, like Laurent,
Oh
um,
yeah, Laurent, yeah.
like people who have been around for ages, people who
Mhm.
are players, people who are tournament organizers, people who are casters, like yourself, people who just kind of blazed the trail for what we see today. When when you decided to come back, obviously
Yeah.
there was external factors. What was the
Yes.
reason that you left in the first place?
Yeah, so then I started the online casting stuff as a volunteer work in like 2002. 2003, I did my first CPL summer 2003, and that was not paid. Did World Cyber Games right after that, 2003, that wasn't paid. I started doing a lot of events and traveling around the world, which I will never change that ever in my life. It was like the best experiences I ever had in my life, at least in terms of this lifetime. And but the thing is, I only started making some sort of income maybe in like 2006, 2007, and it wasn't that much, right? And then once you kind of was wondering where things were going, there was no agencies, nobody was representing casters. They're all representing teams or whatnot for now, or not really any agencies that really came out that stood out yet. Because, for example, the CSA, uh, before they were the CSA, Remington and I was just helping this Andrew Tomlinson do a website for. I even think it was Counter Strike on top of that. Then he evolved his CSA platform to become an agency, and that blew up. And that was not that long ago, right? 7 years, 8 years ago. But nonetheless, I would get into, for example, 2011. So 2010, 2011, I'm still broadcasting, casting around the world, doing gigs here and there. Money was good at that point, but it wasn't consistent, right? So we got to a point where I would travel maybe once every month, once every 2 months, mainly probably because it was expensive to get a Canadian, to fly a Canadian out, I would think. And especially if you want to try to do things more legitimately and you had to start looking at visas and stuff like that too, it was getting very difficult to have like a one-off Canadian come in for a weekend and broadcast an event and then fly home. And it wasn't worth the visa for that, and it wasn't worth the headache of a tournament organizer to get that done for you. So it got to a point where by that time, 2011, I think I'm 27 now because I'm 36 now. So 27, I'm looking at what am I doing in my life at this point, and then I found a career job with a tobacco company. So I started off with Philip Morris in Canada, and I worked with them for 7 years. Yeah, 7 years, and it was a good 7 years too. And just seeing that you had a steady cash flow coming in, benefits, health benefits, pension plans, and stuff like that, it started to weigh my head in terms of this debate. Should I continue into a career job where I could have a steady cash flow? Should I continue to pursue my passion, which is broadcasting video games, and also bringing my passion of detailing the action to a listening audience, a viewing audience, which I love to do. And it just turned out, by weighing the pros and cons, that I just want to continue with the career job. And if it happens that I'm able to do an event here and there because of vacation time with the work, then I'll do it because I still have that passion, like I just said before. And then after that, 2018, started working with a vaping company, as some people may know, called as Juul. So I started with Juul Labs Canada in 2018 and in February. And then after that, unfortunately, there's been some restructuring that happened within the company, but no bad blood. They treated me very, very well. We had a very nice conversation for me to exit as well from the company. Not gonna lie, the package is amazing. So, like I said, they treated me very, very well, and it was nothing but good intentions from both ends, and the way we split off. Because what I told my employer basically is that for them to start and when they wanted to start fast, they had to hire and take the cream of the crop from a lot of companies, including myself, including my colleagues and stuff like that too. So for me to say, for me to see this and say, look, there's probably a lot of people that are as talented as me, or if not, have more potential than I do to help this company succeed. And I was at a point where I wasn't even really liking the job as a sales rep anymore, and I wanted to try to find something new anyway. So this was like a calling, pretty much, to have this situation happen for me. So I told him, look, I'd rather have my colleagues and that are aspiring more than I do to move this company forward. So I'm happy that I was chosen to leave so that they could continue, and that hopefully things will go well for the company in the long run too. So that literally just happened. What, we're June 3rd now. So this happened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I just decided to reflect on things that what I wanted to do next. What do I want to go back into another sales job right away? Or this, like I said, because I had such a good cushion and a good pension plan, separation package from my previous employer, then I could maybe start focusing a little bit more, heading back into esports, as it's been a lot more established than it has been when I last left, right? So I talked about it with my wife. My wife is super supportive about that, and she's like, you know what? Well, I gave her options. I was like, do you think I should go in back into sales and get a job right away? Because my wife is from Vietnam, by the way, so I still have to try to get her over here in Canada. But should I do this? Should I go into broadcasting? She's like, follow your passion. I see, and when I listen to your broadcast, even if I don't understand English that well, I could tell that the passion that you have in your voice, and when you're broadcasting, that you should continue to do it. And she says that I'm pretty good at it, so I think I'm grateful to have that support. And like when I left, I I kind of had like a regret when I left, because when we're looking at ESE Land 15 or 16, I remember taking a break between matches outside, and it was with Anders, right? Because it was Anders' first time coming from to North America to broadcast Counter-Strike. So it was him, me, Dust, Sadokist was there too. Like there was some like up and coming talent. Look at where they are today, right? So we're chilling outside as casters, and then I see this dude, this bald guy, leaning onto the wall, and like a little bit hesitant to talk to us first, but we're making eye contact, and he walks over. It's like, "What's up, dude? Vansilli, man, long time no see." It's I don't know if you remember me. I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure." He goes, "Oh, I'm Jason Moses." I was like, "Holy shit!" So then I got in touch with Jason as well, and then we just started casting some ESE online right after that. But you could see that where Jason started, it was just a blip in his mind to say, "Hey, I kind of want to get into casting at some point, as soon as I'm done playing with Elevate for CSGO,
Yeah.
and then see where this could go." And then look at him today. So then I told myself after that, when I left and look at these guys now, I was like, shit, man, if I waited an extra, or if I continued to grind an extra year or two, could I have been in that same position as well? So again, I always feel like I have something to prove to myself. When you look back at that first question you asked me, Mark, like, do I consider myself like at the top or anything like that too? I always said I feel like I have something to prove to myself all the time. So now, do I have what it takes to be a tier 1 caster? Do I have to what it takes to cast a major, whether it's CS:GO or Valorant or any game that I love to broadcast? Will I have a chance to broadcast a full arena, which is probably something you might want to do as well, Mark?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it. So I think it was just a good transition for me to focus on that now, grind into this, and then see where it goes within the next like 2 months, 3 months. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and I still have that cushion of growing back into a grind of doing sales, which is something I'm apparently pretty good at as well. So I have a few options, which is why not having that stress of looking for a new job right away, I could focus on what I really want to do. which is broadcasting.
So knowing that you are starting fresh and you want to grind and you kind of want to earn that position and not use your previous experience or just stuff that you've done in the past, your Rolodex, does Valorant represent a new opportunity for you? Because for a lot of people, Valorant is a way to start fresh. Look at all the semi-pro CS players that are now switching to Valorant and now are already professional Counter-Strike players. Like professional Valorant players. Like some of the members from Immortals stands out. The guys on Gen G who are always right around the top of the semi-pro scene, but never, maybe one or two of them cracked into the pro scene, but not all of them. Some of the guys like Crashies who got signed to T1. Like I always knew they were good. I casted them for years in Counter-Strike, but now they're seeing a new chance in a new title. Do you feel like that could be something you would want to pursue? Is that your avenue of attack?
Yeah, definitely. Valorant is not only because it's a new game, but it's also a game that I actually enjoy playing. And since the beta came out a month and a half, 2 months ago, I've been playing that game nonstop as well, and I actually enjoy it. So it's not because it's a new game that has a lot of hype that I want to get into it. It's just because it's new. I think there's like the big name casters are already established in their own games. Although, there's always a special place in my heart for Counter-Strike, and I'd love to still continue to do Counter-Strike if I could. Nonetheless, though, you wouldn't see once this league or once the leagues come out and the circuit gets established, I don't think you're going to see a lot of casters jumping back and forth between game to game. So it's a moment right now to try to get your name out again and hopefully be one of the top casters for Valorant itself. And like you said, I think it's a new avenue. I'm definitely going to grind it. And the interesting thing is, when I talked earlier on about, it's not about trying to use your contacts and stuff like that too. Networking is still very, very important, right? What I'm trying to say is I don't want to leverage my networking and my contacts to try to get an upper hand in others. I just hope that my networking and my contacts in the past 18 years that I've casted esports have come across different casters, producers, tournament organizers, etc., and hopefully they appreciated my work ethic and that I put a lot of work into what I do. I might not be the best, I might not be perfect, but at least I would like to consider that I'm easy to work with and that I'm a hard worker. Hopefully that will be some of the things that they'll be like, okay, I remember Vansilli. Now let's look at Vansilli. Can he actually remember how to cast? Can he actually cast this new game? And then hopefully from there, I could prove that from shoutcasting in my mic.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, is always tough, is proving that you can not only still do it, but that you're just as worthy of the opportunity as one of the bigger names. That's like the constant battle. Like, it doesn't even matter. You could know everyone. You could literally know every caster. You could know every tournament organizer, and you could know every production company. And ultimately, if your name is not big enough, you're just not going to get the gigs because the bigger names are what maybe the audience wants. Or at least there is a perception that that's what the audience wants.
They bring the viewership. Exactly.
Yeah. But here's something that I've said for a while, and this is not to discredit the efforts of any tier 1 commentator or caster or host or analyst or any of those people. I don't feel like that's necessarily true. I feel like bad commentary and bad talent can ruin an otherwise good event, but I feel like good talent cannot make a bad event better. I feel like ultimately, if it's a clown fiesta, it's going to be a clown fiesta, and it doesn't matter who the clown is, it's still a clown fiesta. It doesn't make a difference one way or the other. I think ultimately the main draw is the players that are competing or the teams that are competing, and then obviously scope or scale. If it's a $100 event, it's not going to have the same draw as a $100,000 event. So I think, yes, talent does matter, but I don't think that bringing in the biggest names possible is going to see a significant rise in numbers. But it will obviously see some rise in numbers. And this is, again, I'm not saying that these people are bad at their jobs. It's obviously not the case. These guys are all very talented. You and I have worked with a lot of the people in the Counter-Strike scene who are currently sitting at the top. They all are great, and they do a fantastic job. It's just to say that there are so many talented people that get overlooked, and I'm not even talking about myself. I look at like Scrawny as a classic example. Connor's a really good caster, and for a long time, Connor got overlooked. Hugo and Harry, great casters. For a long time, they too were overlooked, and I'm thrilled they're finally getting those opportunities. but it's really difficult. It's kind of like making it as a recording artist. You could be a talented singer-songwriter, but until the right person sees it, it's never going to do anything for you.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I think it boils down to me, you need professionalism on both ends because, like you said, you could have the biggest names in it for an event, for a tournament, but it could be the shittiest event that's ever been run before that could or tarnish your name, or people just don't remember you for that event because they don't really care about that event because it was so chaotic. I could think about back in the day of like what, not CGS. It was like some event that happened for Call of Duty 1 following CPL World Tour. It was in Vegas. There were so many delays, and that it turned out to be like the event never happened. Like machines weren't there, they weren't coming out. Gaming laptops were even being stolen at the tournament and stuff like that too. And you had like such big names from like the Call of Duty scene that went there to play and broadcast. And I wasn't selected to go, and it's like, holy crap, man! I can't believe I didn't get to go. But thankfully, I didn't because the event was so crap. But at the same time, when I'm talking about professionalism, is you as a caster or you as an employee have to definitely show that professionalism on that side. It's not because you've casted XYZ event or X number event under your belt that it's just like, oh, people just need to look at my face. It doesn't matter if I cast seriously or not, and it's going to be a good product no matter what because I could entertain the crowd. I think what I mean by that is ego. Get rid of that ego, add professionalism, and then make that product good because yes, the event name could be a smaller event name, but you making it professional could help that that company and that organization grow as a tournament organizer. And if they loved working with you, they'll bring you back, they'll bring you back, they'll bring you back. And as that grows organically as a tournament, then more people are going to view it at the same time too, and your name gets out there for other events to do.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways, right? And on the other end of the spectrum too, it's like sometimes you could have just the biggest organizers with smaller names, and that's going to help you grow. And like you said, Scrawny is a great example of that because, you know, you guys picked him up for Fragadelphia from him casting a knife round on Train on Reddit. I picked him up on that same clip to have him broadcast Northern Arena in Montreal when it was at the Bell Center. And look where he is now, casting the Blast Spring Series with Launders in June of 2020. So he's moved on up. And he's gone through the fast track. Why? Because not only is he a great commentator, he's a great guy to be around with. He's super professional, and he's easy to work with. He's not being a diva working with his organizers, tournament organizers that hire him. So, so it goes both ways in that sense. And I think that's how you can actually get your name out. But until you get to that part, I think you need a lot of like self-promotion, of course, but not too much. Like know the right people, but don't push too much because, you know, people get annoyed. And unfortunately, sometimes if they don't like you, there's another reason why you're not chosen.
Yeah, I think that was always one of the things that, like, early on, I had a hard time understanding the balance because, and this is not, I didn't go too far into promoting myself. If anything, it was the opposite. I didn't promote myself at all. Like when I wanted to work a gig, I didn't go to them and say, hey, can I work this gig? Or, hey, here's my reel, here's my resume. I didn't do any of that. I just said, if
I still
if they
don't have
want
that
me,
today.
Yeah, like if I was like, if they want me to work with them, they know where to find me. And it's not to say that I was like had an ego and I was like, oh, I'm so good that I should be headhunted. It was more that I just thought that's how it was done. I thought that if I made myself appealing enough with my own work, that they would then come to me. I didn't think like I should go out of my way because these people might not even know who I am. And then I started to think about it more. When you really get involved into the background world, talent managers aren't like, oh, we have a talent manager for Counter-Strike and a talent manager for Dota and a talent manager for Rainbow Six. And it's one person. I do that now. It's one person. I'm one person. I'm hiring talent. So keeping that Rolodex, it's my Rolodex. I don't have those names given to be my somebody else. I don't have a guy underneath me who's approaching talent. So ultimately, like, if you don't get me that information, and if you don't get me your deck, I'm never going to know who you are because I can't possibly keep my thumb on the pulse of every game, especially games that I don't even care about. I'm going to be flat out honest. I have no interest in TCGs, so like Magic and Hearthstone and whatever Runeterra, like all those games. It's not something I'm interested in. It's not to say those games are bad. It's just not for me. So as a result, I don't know who any of the talent is in those games. Like it's really
Makes
hard for
sense.
me to keep track. So it took me a while to figure that out. And when I finally started doing it, it was off the back of a suggestion actually from Hugo and Harry. They both said, no, you should really do that. You should start just dropping your name on people and see what they say. I was like, all right, well, here goes. And I ended up hosting my first event shortly after. It was DreamHack Austin. And I've since
Yeah.
hosted multiple DreamHacks. And I've transitioned more into a host role and out of the casting role, which, to be
Remember
honest,
you,
I
MPL.
I find it more appealing to my personality. I like casting, but man, hosting is so much fun because it's all
Yeah.
about just being lively and entertaining. And it's not to say that casting isn't. It's just casting is more of a drain, and I just feel
Yeah.
like I can really pour myself into hosting a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you make total sense here, Mark, because I'm at the point where I'm trying to make a comeback, or just try to dabble and see what's out there. But again, I've made my networks, I've made my contacts in the past years, but I've never been like, "Hey, I'm back." I've maybe put it on Twitter here and there, and then the X amount of people that follow me or know me are able to reach out and then support, right? But when it comes down to you, oh, there's a next Valorant event coming up. Oh, there's a next CS:GO event coming up. I never went to those people and say, "Hey, have you guys ever considered me, or do you guys remember me, or do you guys think I might have a chance to get into that?" So I haven't done that. I don't have that highlight reel. So I think even from this conversation, it's something that's interesting that I should probably look into to maybe try to bring back
Absolutely.
actually into coming back into the scene. One thing though is definitely when we talked about me losing my job earlier on, and I said, I tweeted it out. I've had so much support from the community, the retweets, the loves, the likes, and everything. I'm so grateful and blessed, and it shows that there you go. Like treating people right and being treated right, it pays off really in the end, even if you don't think that there's any immediate results. I'm just trying to click through back to my Twitter, but when I said I lost my job, I had like here I'm clicking it right now. 312,000 impressions and 23,000 engagements, 24,000 engagements on my tweet, just from people from the community, from CS:GO, from Valorant, or just any other games that I've cast in the past, just really supporting me and want to see me succeed, which is amazing to see. So I think I need to leverage that now, and to seeing what's out there.
Yeah, I had seen the tweet. I don't know if I might even have retweeted it. I don't remember. I know I liked it for sure because I saw it, and I know we had been talking because not long
Yeah,
before then we had actually casted that Pittsburgh Knights Valorant event. You were still
that's right.
employed at the time.
That's right.
Now, looking at your employment history, when you started in esports, you were much younger.
Yeah.
How old were you when you casted your first event?
18. So
18.
when yeah, CPL summer 2003, I just turned 18 that year. Started casting online at 17 with Urban Terror, as I mentioned before, and then just started doing events and after events with TSN for a few years.
What was your so you didn't really have like a career path before that. You were just a student and a young kid.
Yep,
So you kind of just
yep.
tumbled into it. When you were casting early on, were you planning out a career path, or were you just kind of like riding the wave and seeing what happened with this, and then when that ended, you just jumped into whatever made sense?
Yeah, it just kind of fell together into place. Like how it started was I was playing Urban Terror, and then I talked to you how I was in a clan. So basically, how I found Warwitch was I was in a clan back then. I don't know if you guys know what clans are, if you guys are all Zoomers listening right now. But basically, before we were esports organizations, it was just a group of guys want to play together, and you represent your team with this tag walking into a server. So it's like the Cloud9 or the TSM, but we were called Black Ops Squadron, and instead of being an organization, we were just a clan because it's just a group of guys going into a public server together and then just playing. And then from time to time, you'd play like your Cal League or OGL League or whatever. So I was a co-leader for this team, and my co-leader, whose name is Whispers, was also a commentator or shoutcaster for Team Sportscast Network. So I was like, "Hey, man, listen to this guy." And then when I listened to Warwitch, and I was like, "Oh man, I want to bring this into Urban Terror." He wanted to be part of that as well, so we kind of became like a duo to shoutcast in Urban Terror with Oswald as well. And then after that, it's all fun and games, doing it online and everything too. Actually, before I even got picked up by TSN, it actually took me about 8 months and like 25 demos until they finally accepted me into a non-paid organization, by the way. It was just a volunteer group of guys, same thing, TSN when it first started was like a clan for broadcasting. We're just a bunch of people that are passionate about broadcasting video games and wanted to bring our community together with some action that we could shoutcast through Winamp for people to listen to. So I sent in my first demo, wasn't good enough. My second demo wasn't good enough. And big shout out to TSN Byte, Jeremiah Fulbright. He was the one that really supported me and to say, look, you could maybe work on this, you could maybe work on that, try to build up on this too. Once I finally made it into TSN and had the tagline of TSN Vansilli, I was into that organization only because I had potential, not because I was good yet. So when, again, that mentality of me saying I always have something to prove and I feel that I'm never at the top is because I still try to find that recognition from when I first started with TSN. I want to be able to be as good as the casters that I've looked up to when I first joined. So the Warwitch, the Boomerman, the Smeagol, actually, that even came after me, but it still became a better caster than me. So there was so much more to learn. The Red Eye, Paul Red Eye was actually part of TSN as well. Joe Miller, like all those guys that are on the top tier 1 right now and that have started in esports way back when, all came through TSN. So that being said, I did my first event for at CPL World Tour. Going back to your question, sorry, Mark. So we did CPL summer 2003, and then after that was, I think in October, was World Cyber Games 2003 in South Korea, so in Daejeon, Korea. And then they asked me to go, and I went with DJ Wheat, and that's where I met DJ Wheat for the first time. Him and I even roomed together, and he was casting Warcraft 3 with Came Deer, who was also a TSN caster for Warcraft 3. And casted some some CS 1.6 with myself, and he also did Urban Terror. So he did a lot of games for World Cyber Games, and World Cyber Games really loved him. So it was nice to be under his wing and to learn a bit. So then after that, I just started doing events, always for free, always traveling. And then I started to get like this passion. Well, I already had that passion from doing my first event and being on ABC World News on that snippet, as I told you before, from T3D versus 4 Kings. And then that just gave me that drive. I was like, oh my God, I want this to be the next best thing. I want this to be on national television. I want to be part of that crew that's going to make it and say, look at everything that these guys have done in the past and look at where they are now on TV in a suit, being the Troy Aiken of I don't know, whatever game you're going to be casting on mainstream TV these days, right? So I wanted to pursue that, and then that was when I was 17. And then by the time I was about 23, 24, I started finally to get paid a little bit more than what it used to be in the past. Because in the past, let's face it, I'll tell you guys the honest truth. So they pay you the airfare, they pay you the hotel, but your salary was not a salary. They only gave you like $180 for the weekend as a per diem. So you would have food to spend, money to spend for food while you're there. So what I would do is that I would actually just buy instant noodles or something like that, so I could save the rest of the money for as an income for something that was cool while I was working part-time at a grocery store and also being a university student. So after that, I actually wanted to drop out of school, and I did drop out of school to try to pursue it for the first time as a full-time thing. It didn't work out, went back to school, tried again, and then I had a second wave. I wanted to try again, and then I quit school again, but this time I quit for good, and never graduated. And then as I started doing more and more events, by the time 2011 rolls up, as we fast forward, then 2011 comes, and I'm like, man, it's been that at that point maybe at least 10 years that I've been in the scene and that I haven't seen any improvement in or seen any more money or cash flow coming in. I needed to find something more full time, and that's how I transitioned over to a full time career after. So yeah, it was a mix of a lot of things. Never finished school, but I think it all still was a good decision. I'm still going to recommend people that are listening to this right now to finish school though while you have that chance, because right now, like in all honesty, as I'm transitioning into a new job or looking for a new job, if it wasn't for the networking, if it wasn't for me being passionate and really showing, like, actually, you know what, when I told you I had to do a demo reel and stuff like that for casting, I've been doing that for regular career jobs. So I've applied that mentality for career jobs, and I've gotten good jobs thanks to that. So apply that into my esports, maybe it might work out, but if it doesn't, that degree definitely is going to help. So please stay in school. But if not, for me, where it didn't work out for school, I was still able to hone some good personal skills in terms of like being likable, understanding people, being empathetic, being not shy actually about ranking. You know how you're afraid of your boss or your boss's boss or even to the president? Because I've casted so many events in front of live people, hundreds, thousands, or even online to maybe millions of views for like my top 10 Ninja Diffuse that I did with Austin back then. I developed an ease to talk to in front of people and just to be how do you say, you know, when you have good interactions with people.
You're just a people
People
person.
friendly.
People
Yeah, I guess
friendly.
people person. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess so.
You've got good
So
social
yeah,
skills.
yeah, exactly. So having social skills and not being afraid to talk to upper management was definitely thanks to esports. And because of that, I was able to get a good career job in sales. And now because of also what I've done with esports, it's also like, holy shit, this is like something new that I've never heard of. And that they find more interest into my esports side of my life outside of work. And it all blended very, very well together. So I never had any type of stress trying to find something that I enjoy doing. So I hope it continues that way.
Do you have any regrets looking back and thinking, like, I know you had said, oh man, all these guys I used to work with, they're now at the top. But at the same point in time, I'm not looking at them as much. I'm not looking at the casters. I'm looking at Joe Miller, DJ Wheat, those guys, the guys who now work in the background. Do you feel like you would have transitioned off camera and worked your way into more of like management and business side? Because that's actually more of along the lines of what I have done over the years.
Yeah.
Is try to use, try to basically use my casting skills as an opportunity to get in. And then once I'm in, I prove my worth elsewise. Like, you mentioned school. Dude, I didn't go to school one day. I didn't go to college at all. When I was in high school, the crap was hitting the fan pretty hard in my family life. So my senior year of high school I had checked out pretty much. So I didn't take my SATs. I barely graduated because I almost never went to school. I cut a lot of class. It's not that I got bad grades. It was actually the opposite. I frustrated my teachers because despite the fact that I wouldn't do homework or even show up, I would somehow pass my classes because I knew the subject matter. I just didn't care enough to apply myself.
So you're a smart guy still.
Yeah, I mean, I still had an IQ level. I just didn't care.
Yeah.
So and in that sense, like, I was dumb. Like, I was smart, but I was stupid. I wish I had applied myself harder, but I didn't go to college. And as a result, I had to work so damn hard for literally every opportunity I've ever gotten. I wanted to get into IT and computers years ago, and like no one hires you if you don't have a bachelor's degree in computer science or 5 years of experience, which without a bachelor's degree in computer science, I couldn't get the 5 years of experience. And eventually I got lucky and found a company that would hire me. And within a year, I had gone, not even, it was 6 months. Within 6 months, I went from a junior technician to a senior network operator. Like, I literally went from the bottom to the top from our engineering platforms. So, like, I went from literally the lowest level employee to the highest level I could get as an employee because I just proved that I, like, could apply myself and was willing to work hard. When I worked for ESEA, I started as a caster, and I finished, community management, product management. I was helping write press releases. I was doing copy work. I was doing whatever I could, and I got to that point by just working hard. But the point is, if you know what you want to do and you can go to school for it, you don't have to work as hard. You do the work in school so that when you get out, the people just hire you to do what you wanted to do the whole time. And I think part of the problem is, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and you might have been in the same boat. Now I'm more like 100%. I've identified what I want to do, and I've been lucky enough that I've been able to do it for a long time. But when you look at these guys that have worked into the business side and you see what they've been able to do, I'm sure you feel like a small sense of like, oh man, if I'd stuck with it, I'd be with them. But at the same point in time, there's probably a little bit of hope too, because the thought is you left and honed skills elsewhere that are still valuable and apply here.
Exactly.
So you can just go right back into it. Like, you got off the horse, but the horse didn't go anywhere. It's just it just sat there waiting for you to jump back on. It's not like the horse took off and you have to chase after it again. In my mind, you're in a great position to just jump back on the horse and keep riding like nothing ever happened.
I'm actually very happy I don't have to run after a horse because I gained so much weight since I first started casting that I would have never been able to catch on to that horse. But yeah, and just to get back to what you were saying here, Mark, like for a lot of the kids right now that are graduating that are still looking for jobs, the job applications is like, yeah, you need a minimum bachelor's degree, master's degree, and 5-10 years of experience on top of that. And like, you just came out of school. How the hell are you going to land that job? And now you look at people like you and I that doesn't even have the school portion of it either. So how do you balance that or try to get in? So at least by finishing your degree, you get at least one thing that's off that checklist, and then you sell yourself, you prove yourself that you could actually do that job for that 5 year position that they're looking for, right? So I think that's the important part for that. When we go back to that question of what you're saying, do I regret? Definitely do regret. I mean, like I said, if I stayed an extra year or two, I could have at least still be casting. Hopefully, I don't want to think. And again, I'm talking about ego, right? I don't want to have that ego to say I probably would have made it to the top if I stuck with what I did for an extra 1 or 2 years. But I think that with my work ethic and working hard enough, I would be able to have a lot more gigs than I would when I left finally, right? And so yeah, I think that's my biggest regret there. When it comes to working in the back end, definitely 100%. I think it's something that I always wanted moving forward too, because I'm 36 now. My face is still cute, but then in 5 to 6 years, I might have the face for radio again, and people don't want to hire me because you have to be superficial. You have to face that music at the same time too. That they're not going to hire somebody that looks old or somebody that looks crippled or whatever. In terms of like facial recognition, you still have to have some sort of look and standard. Unfortunately, that's how it is, right? Of course, maybe it's different. It's going to be different as I'm talking about this now, because we've talked a lot about discrimination these days in the past few years and talked more about inclusion, right? And it's going to be great to see once we get to that part where it's just going to be normal and nobody's going to be judged for who they are or what they look like whenever they're on camera, and people just love them for who they are and to be accepted for who they are. But when you're looking at the industry, just to face it and to call out the industry, not necessarily in esports but just in general, you need to have that pretty boy face, or at least some certain standard to be able to be on camera often, right? So to get back on that, once I reached that area where I'm not likable visually anymore on camera, I definitely want to be working on the back end. And like you said, because I've left esports, because I've worked now close to 8-9 years in the corporate world, I understand what it's like to work with timelines. I understand what it's like to work with different agencies that wants to work on projects with you and stuff like that as well for the company. You know what it's like to have a hierarchy of rank, know when it's time to be serious, know when to have the right discussions with the right people at the right time, instead of having the person, for example, I'll just take it as an example, unfortunately here, but like in the Rainbow Six scene, you had one player from Latin America that just said F an NDA. Let me just spill the beans and everything that's happening between Ubisoft and our organization, and that's not how it works. That's not how professionalism works, and that's not how business works. So as people are trying to get right into the business from the get-go with no experience of the corporate world yet, it's hard for you to get into that part. So I think I'm thankful that I was able to hone those skills and to hone those that type of business acumen to be able to apply that moving back into esports if I have the opportunity to work in the back end too. And the reason why I want to work in the back end is because I still have that same dream from when I started when I was 17 years old, that to remove that stigma between traditional sports and esports, and so that we could all enjoy esports. Even maybe it shouldn't be called esports in the end, but right now it's called esports. I want that to be accepted by the mainstream so that we could have a normal acceptancy of professional esports players, professional gamers, professional casters, and see that on your Fox Thursdays following like NFL Thursdays, so that would be sick to see.
I mean, that's something that you'll have as a leg up.
Yeah.
When it becomes more and more corporate, ultimately they're going to expect more and more professionalism. And this isn't to say that current casters are non-professionals. That's not exactly the case. But in some scenes and for some of them, there is a certain amount of just laissez-faire attitude where it's just kind of like, I'm here and I'm just going to ride this wave and talk about games and just like it's not necessarily approached the same way as maybe someone in traditional sports approaches it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just generalizing, but I feel like you do have a serious level of professionalism because of your
Thank
years
you.
of early experience where you started when it was like, honestly, it was kind of a joke. Like back then, it was like the
Yeah.
thing that everyone makes fun of. When
Yep.
you hear traditional media or sports media specifically talk about esports, that's what they imagine in their head is a convention hall filled with hundreds of sweaty nerds all playing games until the wee hours of the night. And
Some
it's
people still don't
filmed.
want deodorant, though, Mark.
Yeah, right. And it's like it's filmed on an iPhone camera, and
Yeah.
like they're using flashlights as spots. That's what like a lot of these people assume. They don't realize that they're actually next to a studio that produces this
That's right.
content. That's the crazy part of where
But
we've come today.
But here's the thing, though. Even though we've gone to that part today, if you're still looking at mainstream media as how they're treating esports, it's still a split battle. There's still a stigma.
Yeah,
Instead of being filmed
100%.
on an iPhone with couches and Doritos, that's what you picture. Now you actually see the visuals of what it's like, and then what's going in their mind is how they're trying to comprehend how does it fill an arena? How did a Fortnite tournament give $2 million to a number one seed or a number one winner? And how are these kids or even professional adults able to make this money? And why is there production? Why is there this? Why is this that? This shouldn't be considered a sport because it's not a sport. As much as esports is trying to make it as serious as it is as watching a football game or a hockey game. The traditional sports still pushes it away because they're like, there's no way you could actually make it like us. There's no way that I am going to accept esports into sports.
Yeah,
And that's the stigma, right?
but
We've always had those debates in our cultures over a lot of topics.
here's the crazy thing, right? We talk about how there is this stigma associated with esports that these guys this is all like a bubble and it's all fake and there's no way this will last and it's a joke and why would anyone want to watch somebody play a video game?
Yeah.
The appearance fees currently for top streamers represented by companies like, for instance, Loaded, who represents a lot of the big streamers currently, is above that of a professional athlete in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
I've heard as much as $75,000 a day as an appearance fee that was turned down because it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That
No, it's
to
insane.
me is absolutely insane. I mean, these are multimillionaires who made their money playing video games. So
Yeah.
you now see brands who are like, why would I pay 50 grand to get, I don't know, the captain of a hockey team or some first baseman who's currently on IR when I could spend 50 grand and get this kid who directly appeals to people who buy our product and consume our product. Like I look at that as serious marketing value. Like esports to me has higher levels of marketing value for a lot of younger companies.
Exactly. Even older companies.
Yeah. I mean, look at like Red Bull, for instance. Is Red Bull going to sell more Red Bull by bringing in that like a traditional athlete, or are they going to sell more Red Bull by bringing in someone like Shroud?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like when you're looking at the business side, like for example, when you see the Pittsburgh Steelers becoming an organization, when you're seeing all these sports organizations trying to pick up teams, is because they see the value of the marketing dollars of how much a player or a known player in the esports scene could bring in terms of fan base into their organization. I think right now what we're trying to do as well is how is the NBC or the Fox or the ESPN going to try to capitalize on viewership that's been lost from year to year to year because less people are watching TV. How do they apply it into esports? And that's what's kind of missing, I think, in that formula right now too. But when you look at it that way as well, you're right, Mark. Like they want to go for the Shroud instead of maybe somebody else, like I don't know, maybe not. I wouldn't say Sidney Crosby because Sidney Crosby is like super known, but like, but you're right. If it's just going to be like a regular hockey player, a local, like maybe a third linesman in a hockey team, I could think about David Desharnais, for example, for the Montreal Canadiens. You're going to tell me who exactly, right? People know him in Montreal, but they won't know him worldwide. Shroud, he's known worldwide, so that's how maybe that type of money, why he costs that much, it's because of the reach he's able to bring out. At that point, though, when you're talking about that bubble, I unfortunately still believe that esports is still in another bubble here, though. Uh, is it going to pop? Maybe it'll pop, but I don't think it's going to pop to the sense where it was maybe in 2007 when CGS kind of like split the CS community between 1.6 and Source. I don't think it's going to pop like in 2005 or so when CPL kind of disappeared and WSVG tried to come out and pick up the pace, and then it didn't work out either. But it's going to pop. It's still going to survive. But I think maybe realistically, we might look back at the amount of spending dollars we want to put into esports too.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, one of the big differences between then and now is back in the day, during the CGS era, you had like one or two people pumping up that bubble.
Yeah.
It didn't grow organically.
Yeah.
These days, I feel like it grew a little bit more organically. It's not like someone snapped their fingers and overnight it became $1 billion industry. These companies that have been building it for a long time, I mean, obviously the one that stands out big time is ESL. They've been around for a long, long time.
Yep.
They've been the ones slowly building up this industry. And then once it started to build enough that people got interested, others came along too. So now it's not just like one or two companies leading the charge. It's dozens of these companies that are all growing at the same time. Now, unfortunately, that does mean that there are snake oil salesmen and there are companies coming in who are bogus and illegitimate that are going to take advantage of an opportunity to try to make a quick buck. So those are the companies that might cause some deflation of the bubble, but I don't think it's going to pop. I do think you'll see a shrink, but it'll mostly be all the companies who thought they could just buzzword profit. They could just come in and drop all the names they needed to make money, and they're going to realize quickly that that doesn't work, because eventually the industry will catch the frauds. Like, we're very adept at finding out who's fake. How many times have you seen an esports federation pop up on social media and everyone goes, who the hell are these people? That has happened at least a dozen times in the last 5 years, where these esports coalitions or committees or federations, and you have all of these experts, people who have supposedly been in this industry for a decade somehow, and they are not known by anybody. Like, how is that even possible that you could claim to be an expert in esports and be in this industry for a decade, and then literally every OG who helped build the industry is going, who the hell is this guy to say that he did what I did? Why did I not get contacted? Like, I don't trust any of those esports federation things if I don't see a name that I recognize. I just don't think that it makes any sense. And ultimately, what happens to all of them? They disappear. They just vanish. They go away because people realize quickly, oh, this isn't as easy as we thought. We couldn't just, write esports on something and all of a sudden make millions of dollars, because that's not exactly how it works.
No, definitely. And I think we are getting to a point where, you talked about overlapping of schedules and stuff like that earlier on, Mark, and oversaturation of events and stuff like that too. I think we're getting to a point where we're starting to not necessarily see that, but we might get a halt at some point, because when you're looking at it here, TOs are just trying to be that number one. Everybody's trying to like a dog eat dog in that kind of thing, and nobody's really going into like, everybody's trying to be the league, right? Because there's not multiple NHL leagues, there's not multiple NFL leagues, there's not multiple NBAs. So right now we're in this era where people are just fighting to be that top dog, whether it be ESL, whether it be Face It, whether it be even another comer like Blast or something like that, that's going to overtake it all. And then suddenly, I think we're going to start seeing some mergers, dog eat dog, and then finally we're going to see something a little bit more established into more traditional, where maybe we could see, like, I don't know, regular leagues and stuff like that too. But then again, I think my debate is always, should esports follow the same type of pattern that the leagues currently are doing for the NHL and the NFL? And I asked Alchemist about that too, Jason Baker. I was like, hey, do you think that that esports should actually not follow like the NHL 82 games a season or whatnot, 63 games a season or whatever it is? He's like, well, I don't know. I think it's different, because he doesn't really care for the whole 63 games. He just wants to watch the playoffs. And when you're actually looking at tournaments right now, it's always tournament play, meaning that you're always going to have playoffs in the end. People are, maybe some fans are getting a little bit tired about it, because it's always tournaments after tournaments after tournaments every weekend pretty much right now. So you don't really know what
which one has more weight into winning like an ESL or a DreamHack or a Faceit or whatnot anymore. But I think at some point we will finally see that type of grandiose structure of esports.
We may get there one day.
Hopefully in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure at this point I could probably bring you back for like 3 or 4 more episodes and continue to pick your brain about the old days, and also to keep up to date on what's going on with you currently, because I know that you're trying to grind your way back to the top. So I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thanks so much, Mark. Thanks for having me as well, and hopefully it's been fun for the listeners too. So if they did enjoy it and you'd like to have me back, I'd be more than happy to, because I want to make sure that at the same time you have good content for your show too, and hopefully this was good content for your viewers and listeners.
I'm sure that it'll be just fine. Thank you, Alex, for joining me. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you guys liked what we did, make sure you follow us on social media. It's twitter.com/NERDSTgamers. You can also follow me, twitter.com/Bach_TV, and twitter.com/Vansilli, VANSILLI, or 1L?
Correct. You got it right.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. So VANSILLI. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.